With matcha becoming more popular every day and cafes across the United States offering matcha lattes, it begs the question, what exactly is matcha? What matcha is, where it's from, how to make matcha, the differences between ceremonial culinary, and basically everything you need to know in one concise video. So by the end of this, you'll be up to speed with matcha. By the way, my name is Mark and I am the matcha miller of Ooika. Ooika is one of the only places outside of Japan in the world that grinds matcha fresh in-house, and we do that right here in the United States. Speaking of grinding, let's first talk about what actually is matcha. On the surface, matcha is simply ground up green tea, ground up into a powder, but there's actually 3 other features that make matcha unique versus any other ground up green tea. Number 1, matcha must be from Japan. Number 2, matcha must be ground from a very special type of green tea called tencha. It can't be just any other green tea. And if you're curious what that looks like, I happen to have some tencha right here. Here we have tencha. And by the way, I have a dedicated video which you can click right there, which will tell you everything you need to know about tencha. And the third thing that makes matcha unique is the plant is actually shaded before harvesting, anywhere from 20 to 60 days. Why? Well, the shading process is important because it has 2 very big effects on the matcha. The first effect is you get that bright neon green color, which we associate with high quality matcha. The second thing is about taste. By shading the plant, we reduce the amount of bitterness and increase the amount of sweetness and savory. Next up is Matcha Healthy. Yes, matcha is very healthy. Not medicine, it's not going to cure any diseases, and to be honest, the health benefits of it are not why I became interested in matcha to begin with, but it is worth covering some of the notes. Firstly, matcha is filled with antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, amino acids like L-theanine, which have been shown to increase memory and to also make you feel calm. It induces alpha brain waves. There's a bunch of studies that you can look up. Yes, matcha is very healthy. In addition to all of that, matcha also is good for your teeth, surprisingly enough. It can reduce cavities. I've interviewed a doctor on my blog, which I'll post in the comments below so you can see that it's not just me saying that, but there is scientific rigor behind this. Let's move on to what should matcha taste like. You may have had some bad experiences with having matcha before that tastes very bitter, and there is a good reason for that. Fake matcha that's from, let's say, Korea or China, or Indonesia, or even parts of Japan that label it, let's say, imprecisely to their benefit, will typically have corners, cost, and production that make the final matcha taste bitter and really not very pleasant. But if we talk about a good matcha that's sourced correctly and has good labeling, we can expect a myriad of flavors and textures and aftertastes. Good matcha will typically be very savory, umami, rich, almost like a dashi stock, a Japanese soup. Some matchas will be herbal or even minty or pepperminty. Sometimes they'll be more vegetal, like raw eggplant or soft tomato. And you'll even find fruit notes like berries and persimmons, apples, pears, and sometimes even tropical fruits. This is why there's a culture built around matcha, because one simple plant can create such a wide, vast array of experiences, flavors, textures, and aromas. And this answers the very good question, why can't we do to spinach what we do with tea? Well, it's for a simple reason. Spinach and cabbage and leafy vegetables, other than the tea plant, don't have the high number of different chemical compounds that are within tea that can manifest so many different aromas, textures, aftertastes, and overall flavor components. Let's talk about caffeine. Yes, matcha has caffeine. In fact, all tea has caffeine. To be considered tea, it must be from the tea plant, Camellia sinensis. Herbal tea is actually not a tea, it's considered a tisane. Coffee, which has, let's say, 90 milligrams of caffeine per cup. When you drink it, it will hit you right away. You'll have your caffeine high and then you will have your crash. So when you drink matcha, you have a graceful and subtle increase of alertness and focus, and then it gently tapers off over time. With that said, a bowl of matcha will have about 30 milligrams of caffeine in it, although that can really vary a lot. When we think back to the old days, the reason that matcha became popular in Japan is because the monks, the Buddhist monks, used it as a way to keep them focused and alert and also calm. If they drank coffee, they'd probably be a little bit too jittery to focus on their meditation. And that's what makes matcha so exciting, is that we're able to enjoy, let's say, some of the benefits of caffeine without the negative jitters and crashes and also sensitivity, because again, there is about 1/3 the amount of caffeine in a bowl of matcha that you get in a cup of coffee. Let's talk about the grades of matcha. Ceremonial matcha like this is meant to be consumed just with water, not adding anything in, no milk, no cream, no sugar. Ceremonial matcha we'll expect to be shaded longer, which makes it taste more savory. We'd also expect that ceremonial matcha would be made out of material that was picked from the tea plant in the spring first harvest, known as ichibancha. Culinary matcha, on the other hand, is not really meant to be consumed with water. It's meant to be consumed with milk or sugar or made into pastry or sweets. And we can see the color is much more dull. It's muddy colored, it's brownish yellow. Let me reveal a little insider secret. It turns out that these grades, culinary and ceremonial, don't actually exist. Instead, they're actually marketing terms. They're no different than the words best or quality or premium. In fact, one company might call their lowest, cheapest matcha their culinary grade, and the quality of that material may be substantially higher than another company's most expensive ceremonial grade. When you were young and you were a kid and you went to the grocery store and you realized there was a difference in taste between a Macintosh and Fuji apple, didn't that make you hungry to try all the different varieties and see what is the range of apples? What tastes and flavors and aromas are out there that you haven't experienced yet? That's what's so exciting about matcha, is all the different cultivars, all the blends, all the regions, all of the producers you can taste and experience. Let's talk about a difficult subject, which is good and bad matcha. How do you know that you're getting good matcha? Price comes into play here a lot. A very affordable matcha that is priced appropriately is a good matcha. The same matcha, which we've already said is good, if it was selling for far more than it should based on the quality of it, then that is a bad matcha. Higher quality matcha should have a brighter green appearance. This isn't always exactly true. Just because it's bright green doesn't make it a good matcha, and just because it's not the most green doesn't make it a bad matcha. Certain cultivars, certain variety of tea is more vibrantly colored than others. Bright green color like this is a signifier of quality. I can take my finger, I can put it in the matcha and I can pull down, and you'll see with this high quality matcha that was ground on a stone mill recently, by the way, in the last 2 weeks, it's silky smooth. It feels like a piece of silk. It's very nice. On the other hand, we have this lower quality matcha. If I pull down, you'll see there's much more white showing through of the paper. That's where the particles of matcha are getting stuck. It also feels sandy and gritty. Let's talk about coffee. When you have coffee, you grind the beans into coffee grounds and then you drink it right away. Right? You would never want to take coffee grounds that are 6 months old and drink that, because it would be stale. Here's the problem when it comes to matcha. Matcha is not like coffee in that regard. Matcha is actually far more volatile. Because the particles of matcha are so small, they immediately begin to oxidize. Within 6 months, you've lost 30% of the antioxidant potential of matcha. Even more scary, within 30 days of milling, you've already had a decrease in the flavor. You can noticeably tell the difference between fresh ground matcha and matcha that's even a month old, let alone 6 months old. It's finally time to make a bowl of matcha. We're going to add boiling water to the bowl. We're going to take our whisk and put it into the water. Our bowl is warm. Let's get rid of the water and let's dry the bowl. Now let's add our matcha. I'm going to be doing that by using a strainer. We're going to put in 2 grams of matcha powder into the strainer. Now we're going to just strain it through. Our powder is in the bowl. Now let's add the water. 70 to 75 degrees Celsius. That's it. I could comfortably drink this in 3 sips without those 3 sips being gulps. Now it's time to whisk. I'm gonna go back and forth with my wrist only. And make sure not to scrape the bottom of the bowl. Our matcha looks perfect. Let's give it a try. Savory, complex, sweet, and no bitterness whatsoever, no astringency. It's so smooth. Let's make a matcha latte. Making a matcha latte is incredibly easy because the beginning, making the matcha, is exactly the same. Now let's get the second part ready, the latte. We'll add in some ice. And then I like to use oat milk. We're gonna fill it up, leaving a little room at the top for our matcha. Speaking of which, now we take our matcha and just drizzle it over the top, making sure to get all of that foam. And that is how you make a perfect matcha latte. If you want to sweeten it, you could put in some simple syrup or honey, but plain I think is good too. Now what if you want to make matcha but you don't have any tools? No bamboo whisks, nothing like that. All we need is a mason jar with lid or a thermos of some kind. We're going to put 2 grams of matcha in our container. I have a little pre-measured amount right here. Then we're going to add our 50 milliliters of water. It's about right. It's always better to put less than too much. We'll put our lid on and then shake. Make sure there's no clumps. Once you're satisfied with the shaking, you'll open it up and pour it into a glass. Make sure to get all that foam. And you can see, that's actually not too bad. But if you just want to have a quick matcha break, this method is so simple and you don't need any fancy tools. A lot of big topics that we covered with matcha. Where it comes from, what makes good quality matcha, how to make matcha, how to make a matcha latte, how to make a matcha latte when you don't have matcha making tools. All of it we covered in just 10 minutes, hopefully. If you're looking for a source of high quality matcha, I would recommend, of course, Ooika.co, link in the description below. We have high grade matcha that is appropriately sourced. It is ceremonial and not just in name. Also, Ooika grinds matcha fresh in the United States with traditional imported in Japanese Ishi-Usu stones. Thank you for watching. If there's any questions about matcha that I did not answer in this video, be sure to leave a comment below and I will read and respond to all of them. Thanks, take it easy guys, I'll see you next time.